Islam's holiest month begins in many parts of the world Thursday night with the sighting of the crescent moon. But the coronavirus pandemic is overshadowing Ramadan this year, with curfews enforced in some countries, mosques shuttered and mass prayers banned. Muslims under lockdown will also be spending it without the usual large gatherings for family meals when it's time to break their fast. Disrupted food supply chains could also pose a challenge over the next month. The United Nations this week said the number of people facing acute food insecurity could nearly double this year to 265 million due to the economic fallout of COVID-19. Millions in the Middle East living on the edge of poverty will depend on neighbours and friends to get by. But even wealthy states in the Gulf are facing challenges. The United Arab Emirates, which imports 90% of the food it consumes, has now eased import regulations and lowered duties to make sure there's enough food to eat during the pandemic. Well, Jacob Greaves reports on how the Gulf nation has been working to become more self-sufficient.
For sand-swept countries like the United Arab Emirates, coronavirus has put the issue of food security back on the table. The Gulf nation relies on imports for around 90% of its food. But in recent years, it's also spent big on high-tech, localised solutions.
I think it definitely is a wake-up call. I think people were talking about it for a long time, but I think coronavirus brought a lot of, pressure to governments to really embed these type of technologies. And I think that while we see this, for example, on the side of conducting business through webinars and all kinds of things, I think more and more people are now seeing how can we use these technologies to fulfill the question of food security.
At this research and development facility in the Emirate of Sharjah, they're testing everything from water desalination using solar panels to this, aquaponics. The process begins in this tank where fish waste enriches the water with nutrients. That's then pumped around tubes to feed plants. The vegetables clean the water, which is circulated back to the fish.
What we're doing differently over here is trying to do this in a way that's extremely energy light, so it's sustainable. We don't need to be connected to the grid over here, which means we could have this anywhere. And because the way we produce water can either be from a saltwater source or humidity in the air, we really could be in the middle of the desert and we could be doing this.
That matters in a hot, dry country that isn't just food insecure. The UAE also has an issue with water scarcity. In this arid desert climate, 66% of all water is used in agriculture. The thinking behind an operation like this is that it lowers those consumption levels. The country has been trying to grow its agri-tech sector for some time. This month, the oil-rich capital of Abu Dhabi ploughed $100 million into 4 companies to help them establish roots in the emirate. One of the beneficiaries, US firm AeroFarms, will use the investment to set up an 8,200 square metre facility aimed at bringing vertical farming to local markets at affordable prices. But for those with their roots already planted in the UAE, the threat of supply chain disruptions could present an opportunity.
The COVID-19 situation gave the local agribusiness a positive impact in which locally farmed produce is highly demanded, while food imports are negatively impacted due to the closure of borders and airports. This is a great opportunity for local producers to penetrate the market, expand their local reach, and increase consumer confidence in their product.
The Dubai-based Badia Farms can produce over 90 tons of leafy greens annually. But there are more than 9 million mouths to feed across the UAE, with food consumption expected to hit 59.2 million tonnes a year by 2025. While COVID-19 is a stark reminder that the country needs to wean itself off imports, agri-tech is still considered more a green shoot than present solution. Jacob Greaves, TRT World, Sharjah.
Well, for more on this, Taufiq Rahim joins us now from Dubai. He's a Middle East politics specialist. Welcome to Money Talks, Taufiq. Now, as we know, Ramadan is a time of fasting, but as well as that, there's also the communal family gatherings for when people break their fast. A lot of people also choose to go to mosques to pray during this holy month. What changes to Ramadan can we expect to see in the Middle East region?
I think, I mean, overall, it's what you said is around the communal aspect. I think in most countries, the food security situation is fairly okay, either in countries where you have across the region access to agriculture, or in the Gulf where they have access to supplies. And right now, you know, all the provisions are available. The questions are, how is that delivered to you, with many restaurants closed, for example? And then how do you gather? I think most people are not going to be able to gather in public spaces, either for prayers in the mosques, there are many restrictions, or, you know, to have that family iftar outside. And even to the extent that you invite multiple family members to your home, that's going to be an open question.
Now, let's look further into the issue of food security, because it has been of particular concern for several countries in the Gulf, countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, where you are. How have these countries been addressing the issue of food security? Because I know a country like the UAE imports 90% of its food, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, these countries have arid climates. They don't have a history of agriculture. They don't have a history of farming, aside from very localized farming or growing particular crops or things like dates. However, in recent years, you've seen an uptick. You mentioned the $100 million of investment recently, but in years prior, across all of the countries, such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, they've made investments in everything ranging from poultry to dairy. And you saw that in a number of the Gulf countries, Qatar recently, but also in Saudi, where they have a very significant milk producer in Al Marai. So, you know, the idea is to kind of take that up a level, but it's never going to be fully self-sufficient within, you know, its borders. And in the past, they've tried to secure farmland in parts of Africa. All of the Gulf countries have. That's had mixed success because of a lot of the geopolitics, the local dynamics. So they're going to have to find some type of third solution, which is obviously challenging in a COVID-19 era where borders become more important and people start to regulate much more closely exports. And so we're going to have to see what that mix and model looks like over the next 3 to 4 years.
Do you think this pandemic will be the impetus for some of these Gulf countries to look at these other ways in terms of ensuring their food security?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're like a decade, you know, away from when this really started. A lot of initiatives were founded around 2009, 10, 11 around food security. And, you know, you look at some of the programs in Qatar, for example, where they had their initial food security strategies. So, you know, today, though, the technology is advanced significantly. I mean, yes, you have things like lab meat, et cetera, but what's really remarkable is vertical farming. You look at hydroponic agriculture. You look at the, as you were mentioning, the aqua technologies, where you can, at a cost-efficient basis, really grow in significant ways. And we're seeing that with produce and so forth. And then obviously with poultry, there's been a lot of gains of how to manage that in these climates. And so I think we're going to see an uptick of that and significant investment in that. And it's not going to go away. I think this pandemic, the memories of it, even after it subsides, even after we find a vaccine, will resonate for quite some time. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the Gulf.
Sure will. Okay, Taufiq Rahim in Dubai, thank you so much for joining us on the program.